Well, Razorback fans, we got a chance to hear from Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator for Arkansas. And I'll admit, in his second year, he's in a pretty interesting spot. So let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Thursday as we are just literally 2 weeks away from Razorback football starting up down there at War Memorial Stadium against UAPB and getting the season started in style. And so, we'll talk about that and get that to the final segment. But it was very much a Petrino discussion that we had yesterday because we had a chance to hear from him, being the offense coordinator. Well, yesterday we also got a chance to hear from Travis Williams. Well, I guess 2 days yesterday. I got my days mixed up. 2 days ago was Bobby Petrino. Yesterday was Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator. And so I know Petrino has taken a lot of the attention and in a good way and the focus of a lot of people. And, we've discussed Petrino, I think, till we're blue in the face. Can't get enough of it. But Travis Williams, he's an interesting guy. He's in an interesting spot. He went viral for that rap video that he did with the team that everyone was talking about. And what was funny in his press conference, and I kind of knew this, but at his press conference, he's like, hey, I've done that for a long time. I've done that ever since I've been in coaching. It's just, that was the one that I guess everybody got a hold of and started talking about it. So it just is a pretty common thing and ends up happening pretty often. But just hearing from his press conference, he had some interesting things to say, specifically about the linebacker position, and we'll do that the next segment. But what I wanted to talk about is just Travis Williams himself, because I remember when he was hired as the defensive coordinator, and he had some connections there when he was at Auburn. I talked to, like Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn and some other guys. They were big fans of him, big fans of his approach and recruiting and his relatability, but were very either unsure or unimpressed by the, quote, X's and O's of the defense. And, when you have something like that happen, every situation's different. The philosophies are different. And, when he came from, I believe it's South Florida, it didn't have these numbers that were just incredible. Like, oh my gosh, he jumped from this to this and that, everything. But just like with every coach that gets hired, you want to give him a chance. You want to see, okay, well, let's see what you got. Arkansas defense, he was taking over and walking into a situation that was dead last in pass defense. Lost a lot of key pieces from the previous year. Lost to Drew Sanders, for instance, there on the defensive side of the ball, which I know was pretty crazy to think about with how impactful he was during that time. But you lost him. You lost also some secondary guys that moved on. Some of them came in. We're in a very precarious situation. But he walked in, and honestly, looking at the defense in general, not, breaking down just each and every little detail, but in general, he did a great job. I know people forget about this, but last year in the beginning of the season, you actually were doing a pretty good job as a team. The problem was you just weren't doing enough. You lost to BYU at home. You made some mistakes. And you lost by a touchdown. But, you went on the road to LSU against the Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden. I don't know how I just forgot his name. Oh, my gosh. It was Jaden, right? Jaden? Yeah. Ooh, it's been a long week. But you went down against a great offense down there at LSU. And it was, I didn't have much hopes for it. Like, you were going down there at night. People are always crazy down there at LSU, and you had just lost to BYU, so you're like, oh, geez, I don't know how good it's going to be. Well, the defense did a pretty good job, all things considered. They did a good enough job to put you in a position to win, but LSU hits a game-winning field goal. You lost by 3 in Death Valley at night. I mean, you were good enough. You were in position to win the game. And then you think about what Arkansas did against Ole Miss. Texas A&M was okay, but Ole Miss, Ole Miss was scoring at will on people, and you held them to 27 points at their place. The defense was not the reason why you lost that game. Alabama on the road by a field goal. You lost that game. The defense played pretty good. Now, if you go back to that game, there were a couple of big plays. Jalen Milroe made some big throws, but it was more of like you had, if I'm trying to remember correctly, in that game, you had one secondary player get hurt, get banged up, had to be taken out, and Alabama exploited that. And there was also a time where it was breakdown in coverage. You're not making an excuse for it because you're still bad and you still don't ever want to give up those types of plays. But I'm just saying that the defense was not the reason the team wasn't any good last year. The defense was not the reason why you lost so many games. They weren't perfect, but we all know and all see what the issue is. So Travis Williams, when he walked in and he was able to accomplish that in such a early part of his tenure here at Arkansas and really have pretty much the same players, added a few here and there from the transfer portal, it was like, okay, the issue's been fixed, hopefully with the offense with Bobby Petrino, but how is Travis Williams and this defense going to go from year one to you? Because I'm telling you right now, I don't want to play woulda, coulda, shoulda, but if Kendall Briles had been the offensive coordinator last year, stayed on with Arkansas another year like he originally was supposed to when turning down Mississippi State, had KJ Jefferson, had all these guys once again, I think Arkansas would have been at least a 7-win team. I know it's excuses, woulda, coulda, shoulda, doesn't matter, but it wouldn't have been as bad as what it was. But now it's time for like the offense. I feel great about the offense for all the reasons I've laid out a lot. We don't need to go into them. But the defense, even though I think Travis Williams did a really good job last year, even though I'm a big Marcus Woodson fan, even though I love Landon Jackson and think he's the best player, in fact, we know he's the best player on the team, there's still just something about the defense that makes me hesitant to go all in on them. To start really feeling like, oh yeah, this defense is going to be just as good as it was last year, maybe even better. I believe the secondary is going to be good. Maybe just as good, maybe better than what it was a year ago. You got to stay healthy and everything, but I like the guys that they have there. I like the job that Marcus Woodson's done. And even the defensive line is kind of the same thing. There's potential there. You got some familiar faces in the starting front four, but you also have a tough situation where you got, not a lot of depth, or at least a lot of unproven depth there. And on the D-line, you got to have depth. But the potential's there. But the thing is like the linebacker, as we all know, has been the problem, or at least has been the concern, and that's been the position group that Travis Williams is ahead of. And there's just so much uncertainty there. How do you feel if this defense ends up being worse this year than what it was a year ago? Even if it's marginally worse. You want to improve, and I know you can't be improving each and every year the same level, and sometimes there'll be some drop-off, but if the defense does not bring it this year and is able to hold their own and be that bend and not break defense, which is what you have to have and what you need to have to be able to win at a place like Arkansas, then, what are people going to think about? Like, what are people going to think about Travis Williams? I mean, the whole coaching staff is on red alert right now because of this situation with Sam Pittman. We all know that. But if the offense takes strides forward and the defense doesn't, I mean, people are going to start saying, hey, Travis Williams need to change something, need to go or whatever, or is it just going to be, hey, we'll deal with it or whatever? Well, that's the ultimate case because defense, as we know, in the modern day of college football especially, it's hard to play. I mean, football's hard to play, but I'm saying difficulty-wise compared to offense and defense, the game is catered more towards the offense. To be able to have an elite defense, you got to be able to have pros. Think back to that 2014, 10 years ago, that defense, to me, again, still looking at that one, was one of the best ones Arkansas's had in a long time. Well, why? What made it so good? Well, you had like 4, maybe 5 bona fide NFL players. You had Trey Flowers. You had Darius Philon. You had Dietrich Wise. Tevin Mitchell even had a good run in the NFL. Martrell Spate played a little bit, which even if he wasn't a great pro, he was a great college football player. He was an All-American. Was he All-American? I know he's first team All-SEC. I don't know if he made it to All-American, but led the SEC in tackles. Just a beast back there. So you got to have pros. You got to be able to recruit those guys, and you just got to do enough. You just got to do enough. That's how you win at Arkansas. The bend and not break defense, you may find it really cliche, but honestly, that's how you win. You're not going to be able to get the athletes defensively like Bama, like Georgia, like LSU. You're just not going to be able to do that. It's a reality. That's why the focus needs to be on offense, and that's how you win games. You can have a good enough defense. Good enough. And when I say good enough, I mean not being the reason why you lose these games, not giving up big play after big play after big play after big play, causing some turnovers, causing some 3-and-outs. Putting less pressure on the offense to have to go back there at third and score every time. If you get in a shootout, that's not the way you want to do it. That's not a sustainable success story right there. But Travis Williams has a lot to prove again this year. I liked what he did in year 1. How is he going to improve in year 2? How is this defense going to look in year 2? I like what they have potentially, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. And we're going to find out in the early parts and the early going of this season what exactly this Razorback football team's made of. That Oklahoma State game on the road in week 2. That one's going to be a telltale sign, at least one of the big ones. Okay, so linebackers are apparently really deep. I don't know. Well, stay with us. We're about to talk about here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, I want to remind everybody that we are brought to you by the Gametime app. We know that we're always looking for tickets. We need tickets for games, tickets for sports. Maybe you got some games that you're going to be attending for Razorbacks this upcoming football season, but you're not a season ticket holder. You want to just buy, whenever you have a chance to. Well, use the Gametime app, because here with the Gametime app, it has all the great benefits that you could possibly get out of any app, guaranteed. You get last minute deals. So if it's something at the very end that maybe you're thinking, hey, honey, let's go to that Razorback game against Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Let's make a day trip out of it. Well, you have a chance to save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy shows, theater, whatever it is. They also have flash deals where you can get even more exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. They have zone deals where you save even more by choosing a section, and you just let Gametime choose the seats for you, as well as the all-in pricing feature where you toggle this feature that shows the prices either up front, which of course will give you the no surprise fees when you get to checkout. But it's a feature you just turn on. So be sure to look into that as well. And you also have seat views. Get panoramic view of your seat before you buy. And the lowest price guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's that easy. So take the guesswork out of buying all these tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So we've been talking Travis Williams and kind of the position he's in and what can the defense really improve upon. And it's all about the linebacker. And I think we even talked about it the other day when we were mentioning Marcus Woodson and the discussions that he's been having with the media and everybody saying it's like, oh yeah, this is the deepest, we're deep at linebacker. It's a strength of ours. And I still could not believe it. I was like, man, listen, I trust you a lot more than me when it comes to knowing football and all that. But that's a mighty bold statement because I just don't see it. And it's not just me. Like everybody in the media, people who cover college football nationally, regionally, whatever it is, it's like they look at it like, I don't know about this. A lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. But Travis Williams, once again, and of course he is the linebacker coach too, as well as the defensive coordinator, he reiterated that fact. And when he was asked about it, he's just talked about the guys they got out of the transfer portal and some of the depth that they've built there. They got a lot of deep dudes that, and even went into being asked about having 4 linebackers in those positions, or at least on the field at one point in time, which to me was like, 4 linebackers, dude. I'll be taking 2. I'll be happy with 2 linebackers, but they're talking about doing 4. And when he was asked about that, he just went into, you could say coach speak or whatever, but he talked about how it's about finding the best 11 guys out there. If it means just 2 linebackers out there, so be it. If it's 4 linebackers out there, so be it. Which, is not a crazy statement to make in the whole grand scheme of things when it comes to checking out college football. But I think what we're going to see is it's just dependent on matchups. Arkansas is going to be facing some pretty good offenses this year. And if it's going up against an offense that might be requiring a little bit more physicality, then maybe we see more linebackers. Or if it's a team that's going to be going up against a lot more speed or a lot more finesse, then maybe you see more defensive backs, whatever it is. There's different ways of going about it. And I'm sure that we'll see different formations and different setups and everything for coaches to go into it and everything. But my approach to it all is that you have to have talent and get your talent out on the field. Because even Travis Williams talked about Landon Jackson as an example. He's like, when finding the best 11 on the field, he's like, I know Landon Jackson's best spot is not going to be standing next to me on the sidelines. He's like, because he's the best out there, and he is going to be out there as much as humanly possible. So getting to find the best guys, I don't really care how it's done. I don't really care in what way, but you have to get the job done. And you can have all these linebackers. You got bodies. You do have that. Like, if you go on ArkansasRazorbacks.com and you look at the roster and you see the LBs, like there's a big number there. But just because you have numbers doesn't mean you have depth. There's a big difference. And to me, depth is about having guys you can count on. And because of the mystery and the uncertainty of that linebacker position, to where the guys that are set up to play or coming into play or whatever, you're like, I haven't seen any of these guys play. I mean, really think about it. Xavier Sori and Brad Spence are the 2 guys we keep hearing about, and we kind of feel like they're going to be the guys. Brad Spence we saw very sparingly last season on a few occasions here and there, and again, potentially looks good. Xavier Sori, former 5-star, played at Georgia, but he didn't play much. Like, that's all we have to go off of. And I'm bringing all that up because as someone who has talked about Razorback football for a long time, or just football in general, it's a fascinating dynamic because mystery always leans us towards the negative. Uncertainty leans us towards the negative. It's not a bad thing, and sometimes we're right. But if we're not sure about something, or if there's not anything proven about something, if it's unproven, then we immediately lean towards the side of caution to try to say, yeah, I ain't about this. This doesn't look good. And that's just life in general. Like, if you see something that you're not sure of or that is unproven, you're a little bit more suspect about it. It's human nature. But how many times have we seen things happen, football or in life, that were unproven, that were mysterious, that were uncertain, that actually worked out really well, that actually ended up being a great thing? I just like I don't know why the first example popped into my mind, but I love movies, and one of my favorite movies, just like everybody else's, it seems like, is like The Dark Knight. I remember the excitement that had to The Dark Knight, but I also remember the weirdness about when Heath Ledger got casted for the Joker, because it was like, well, I'm sorry, this like teen heartthrob guy is coming off Brokeback Mountain like that, and they can't play the Joker. That you can't see it at all. Well, the rest is history. There was uncertainty there. There was a mystery there. And a lot of people, majority of the people, lean towards the air of caution. Now, I'm not trying to sit here and convince you that the linebackers are going to perform on the field like Heath Ledger did in Dark Knight. I'm not trying to convince you of that. I'm just saying that just because we are uncertain about it, or we see mystery in it, from the outside perspective, we're not in the locker room, we're not on the field, on the practice field, we're not seeing all of it. Just because we are uncertain does not mean it's going to be bad. Does not mean it's going to be a problem. It could. But if Marcus Woodson's correct, if Travis Williams is correct, if Bobby Petrino is correct, if Sam Pittman is correct, the guys that are in it and are complimenting this defense and this linebacker crew as much as I've heard them, then it's going to be a pleasant surprise for Razorback fans. Because if you ask me, there's two things. Quarterback, linebacker. If those two things for Arkansas are good, great, Arkansas is going to be a great team this year. If one of them's not, they could be decent. But if neither of them are, then you're in trouble. Guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we? We'll close up shop here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast on the other side of the break, so stay with us. All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I've keep doing this 2 weeks away. It's crazy. 2 weeks away from Razorback football. And it's kind of fun, thinking about that. Because when you do the days, you get the big numbers or higher numbers, but when you just say it's 2 weeks, like, oh man, yeah, it is. It's only 2 weeks away. So 2 weeks away, Razorback football, UAPB. And since we're coming out and doing the theme of 14 days, the number 14, the first 14 comes to your mind in Razorback football. Well, I know mine, and I feel like most of you probably are going to go the same direction. It's Clint Sterner. Now, here's the thing about Clint Sterner. Clint Sterner was the reason I suffered my very first devastating loss as a Razorback fan in 1998. We all know that. And then you had the redemption story in 99. It's all well and good. But unfortunately for Clint Sterner, that's what's he's going to be related to and correlated with is that moment. But, I just think back to when I was a kid and I was 10 years old. I'm showing my age, so shut up. I was 10 years old in 98, and that was kind of when I really started at least following football enough to understand it, which is a great year, all things considered, for me, because that's also like growing up as a Jets fan in 98. The Jets went and played in the AFC title game against the Denver Broncos and John Elway. They lost, but they had a good year. And Arkansas had a really good year compared to what, especially they had suffered through over the past few years since joining the SEC. But, some of those things that really stood out was it's amazing what that team was able to accomplish. And you all know how I feel about Houston Nutt. But I'll give Houston Nutt credit for what he did in that moment, because I don't think he was a great coach. He was a good coach. I don't think he was a great coach, but what he was the right coach for that year's team, because he was a motivator. He was a motivator. He had spirit and spunk and all of that. And that team had a load of talent. Danny Ford, I know that people may feel a certain way about Danny Ford, but I think Danny Ford did a great job recruiting. He just couldn't put it together, He was able to put a team out there that Houston Nutt walked into, and I remember some of those dudes on that team, Clint Sterner, of course, but Anthony Lucas, I believe it was Michael Snowden was still on that team. You had Chris Chikuma, Madre Hill, Jodine Davenport. You had some studs. David Barrett was on that team on the defense side. Of course, Brandon Burlsworth, can't forget him, the All-American. Phenomenal. You had some bona fide dudes. And so, I know that year was kind of always going to be remembered for that moment, but, Sterner had a nice little run there. And I think he was really, up until Ryan Mallett arrived, the best passing threat quarterback that Arkansas had in a long time. So, that's who I'm always going to think of. Number 14 is always going to be Clint Sterner. And I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. It's okay with me. But it feels good to be that close. 2 weeks, folks. Just 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. And we'll be there. Appreciate all of you listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.